It was the summer after graduation, and Jennifer was up late packing for a camping trip with her friends. She had the window open as she sat there folding clothes when she suddenly saw a hand coming through the gap in the screen of her window. Jennifer screamed and the hand flew back. She was stunned, but it could have just been her younger brother pranking her. She got up and looked out the window and saw the figure of a man staring back at her. Jennifer ran into her brother's room but saw him there, playing video games. They called the police, who came and searched the area, but they found nothing. Officers warned her and her parents to lock the windows and doors, but the mother had a feeling that he would come back, and as it turns out, Mother's intuition was right. She went outside and waited in the back porch, and after 20 minutes, she saw a man dressed in black in their backyard. He hid behind a tree and slowly worked his way towards Jennifer's window. The mother yelled something to the stranger and he took off running. Police came back out and again found no trace of him. Jennifer never opened that window again, not even the curtains. Her parents installed some motion detecting lights and that seemed to be the end of that. About 6 months later, Jennifer and her friend got an apartment downtown together, excited as this was their first place outside of home and they are finally living in the city. The downside was that it was street parking only, and after a few weeks, Jennifer's car was broken into. Oddly enough, nothing was taken, but a single rose was sat on the passenger seat. This creeped her out for sure, but she vowed to be vigilant and safe. She always tried to park close to the entrance near the lights, but it was often difficult to get those spots and she would have to park farther away. Things quickly began escalating at this point. Jennifer's car was broken into at least once a week. Most of the time, a flower was left. But once a pair of men's underwear was there instead. And even more strangely, a bag of Tootsie Rolls, weird because it was her favorite candy. This made Jennifer wonder if the person knew her personally, and she started to become suspicious of everyone. There was a laundry machine in the basement of the apartment, and one day Jennifer went down to get a load that finished drying. As she started to fold, she realized that all her bras and panties were gone. By the time the first letter arrived, she had already started making plans to move elsewhere. The letter described a love for her that had been going on for years. He noted things that proved he had been watching Jennifer closely. Not long after, Jennifer was able to arrange for another friend to take over her lease, and she moved in with a new friend on the other side of the city. It was a secured building and had an underground parking garage that was only accessible to tenants. She felt more secure and the extra money spent was well worth the peace of mind. Things were quiet for a few months, and then her roommate got a boyfriend. There was something odd about Ashley's new boyfriend, and her friends were wary of him from the very beginning. For one, he reached out to her. Another reason was that Matt was very good looking, and while Ashley was a wonderful person, she wasn't the type you would typically expect someone like him to date. Ashley was thrilled. She never had a boyfriend and really felt like he was her Prince Charming. Jennifer, however, thought he was weird and creepy the moment they met. She had deleted her Facebook account when the initial stalking began, but created a dummy account to learn more about Matt. It didn't look like he really knew any of his friends in real life. There were only pictures of himself, and the rest of the information was vague. Jennifer and her friends gently tried to discourage Ashley from seeing Matt. He technically hadn't done anything wrong, but he was just so strange. She would immediately get defensive and would shut the conversation down. Matt started to spend more time at the apartment, and Jennifer found herself finding any excuse to avoid coming home. One day she came back home from work and found Matt on the couch, alone, drinking a beer. Ashley had been called into work and she told her that he could just hang out. Jennifer had no desire to spend any time with him, so she grabbed the beer and a snack and headed off to her room and shut the door. About 30 minutes or so, he knocked on Jennifer's door and suggested they watch some TV and get to know each other better because they both loved Ashley. Not wanting to engage in conversation, Jennifer focused on the movie. But at one point, she glanced over to Matt, and he was staring at her with a smile on his face. Jennifer snapped at him and said, "What?" as he just continued to smile and said, "I just can't believe it." "Believed what?" He said nothing and went back to watching the movie. She had no idea what he was talking about, but the interaction had every hair standing up on her body. She excused herself and locked the door to her room. Another month or so went on, and Jennifer had managed to avoid being home for much beyond sleeping and showering. Matt practically lived there and had even brought a bunch of his things into Ashley's room. Jennifer didn't want to move again, but was beginning to look for other options. On Ashley and Matt's 6-month anniversary, there was a huge bouquet of flowers on the table and an already opened card propped up next to it. Jennifer was curious, so she opened the card and her heart started beating through her chest. Without even reading the words Matt wrote, the handwriting was exactly the same as the one her stalker had sent. Jennifer had kept them as evidence and dug them out of her desk for comparison. The handwriting was unique and identical. Matt was the stalker. Jennifer called the police, and as they were on their way, she called Ashley and asked her to come over, terrified to tell her the truth because she knew that her heart would be shattered. The police took a statement from Jennifer and went to Ashley's work to get more information from her and ended up breaking the news. Apparently, Ashley called Matt after and left a furious message even though the cops told her not to say anything, and he completely disappeared after that. There was no Matt or anyone matching his resemblance at the place he said he worked. Ashley had never been to his apartment because he said he would be staying with his friends while trying to save money for a trip to Europe. His family lived out of state, and she said that she had never met a friend of his because he said they had a falling out because he was choosing to spend so much time with her. It was all lies, and in the end, she was dating a stranger. For all they knew, Matt may not have even been his real name. He had left the duffel bag in the apartment that was full of gym clothes, but in one compartment, there were about 10 pictures of Jennifer. All were taken from far away with the exception of one of her sleeping. The sheets were current, so it had to have been at the current apartment before she started locking her bedroom door. A few pictures dated back to before the incident at her parents' house, which was further evidence that it was him as well. 2 pairs of missing underwear were there, and Jennifer shudders to think of what he did with the rest. There was also a Starbucks lid with her red lipstick marks, and a necklace she hadn't even noticed she was missing. The police never tracked him down. Jennifer accepted an opportunity overseas and got out of there. But ever since then, Jennifer deleted all her social media accounts. She became very low profile, looks over her shoulder wherever she goes, as part of her continues to worry if Matt will ever resurface again. 15 years ago, Emma had the misfortune of meeting Dave. She was new to riding the bus to school and didn't happen to know anyone, so she sat by herself. She could feel someone was watching her from behind, so she turned a couple times to look, and that's when she saw Dave. He had brown curly hair and turned away every time she caught him staring. He told Emma she had nice hair and he liked her t-shirt. He asked right off the bat if she would be his girlfriend. Emma said absolutely not. She didn't even know him, and his creepy staring made her uncomfortable. Well, Emma had pointed him out to a few people in school, and everyone she talked to said he was the nicest person they'd ever met and just a bit of an odd duck. Next thing she knows, Dave had joined her photography class and after-school programs. She saw him around every corner and in every hallway of the school. He started popping up to try and hug Emma and tickle her. When she found out he was telling people he was her boyfriend, Emma knew she needed to put her foot down. He kept asking for hugs, and she refused. And that's when things took a turn. Suddenly, anonymous notes were popping up in Emma's locker. Most of the notes said, "always," and nothing else. Some had longer declarations of love. The simplicity of the message gave her chills, and it had to be Dave. Her suspicions were confirmed when pictures of herself began showing up along with the notes. The pictures were all taken from a slight distance, and she finally got scared. One Sunday afternoon, as Emma was watching TV in her bed, she heard Dave's voice next to the bedroom window. He said he watched her walk home one day to see where she lived and wanted to stop by for a visit. He said he knew she wouldn't let him in, so he figured he'd just stop by the window to talk. He quickly left, but now it got serious and adults needed to be involved. Emma's mom thought she was exaggerating. She acknowledged the notes and pictures as weird, but nothing other than a serious infatuation. So, Emma went to Mr. K, who also had Dave as a student, and noticed some of his obsessive behavior and didn't doubt her story for a moment. He spoke to Dave's guidance counselor, and they both sat down with him, telling him that he was making Emma uncomfortable and to stop. This angered Dave. He stormed up to her in the lobby of the school with a glass rose in his hand and threw it at the wall behind her. He screamed in Emma's face about how she had broken his heart just like the rose. Mr. K had to break up the situation, and a few days later, he dropped out of school and Emma went 8 years without seeing Dave. Emma was craving some mac and cheese one day and hit up a popular spot in town to grab some to go. She looked behind the counter and there's Dave. Emma had no idea he was working there and debated leaving for a moment. Middle school was so long ago and she hadn't heard from him since that day in the lobby. Surely this guy cannot still have this obsession with Emma. It was a huge relief when another register opened and a young woman took her order. She wondered if he was even mortified and didn't want to interact. Well, Dave seemed to take Emma's visit as a sign that she was ready to love him. Emma got a friend request from him that night and immediately deleted it. A few nights later, she's getting home and walking on the street when she sees that someone is standing on the side of her house. She gets into the house quickly, locks everything, and watches. And then she sees him, his curly brown hair. Emma called the police and reported this, but of course, there wasn't much they could do. There was no proof, and he hadn't approached her or tried to get in. They did agree to keep someone on lookout in the area, and she had police patrolling more than usual the following nights. But eventually, the police patrol died down, and that's when the late-night knocking began. She could hear it softly on windows and occasionally on the back door, but never dared to answer or get close enough to look. It wasn't every night, maybe 2 or 3 nights a week. The police never seemed to be close enough in the area when it happened, so they couldn't catch him. A couple weeks after the knocking began, Emma received an envelope wedged into the screen door, full of the creepy candid pictures from middle school and another note that said, "Always." She had enough and wanted to have some official record of what was happening. And that's when Emma saw the word "always" carved into her car's back bumper. Emma lost it, and in her rage, she took a picture of the police station sign and the report being filed and sent them over to Dave over Facebook. And she told him to leave her alone, that the police were involved and things will only get worse if he continues. And to her surprise, he simply responded, "You're right." And just like that, he disappeared. Was the mac and cheese worth it? Definitely not. And ever since that day, Emma never saw Dave again. A week before Kim's 10th birthday, she walked to the corner store with a $5 bill and picked up a jar of ragu for her mom. On her way home, a man she'd never seen before began talking. "Hi," he said cheerfully. "My name is Dr. Ramsey. I'm a pediatrician. Do you know what a pediatrician is?" Kim walked along silently, not replying and fervently hoping he would take that as a sign he should leave her alone. "I was just on my way to get some lollipops for the candy jar in my office. What's your name?" Thankfully, they were nearing her house, so she ran forward and went inside. Kim didn't know it then, but that was the beginning of a very long and very scary ordeal. It didn't take long after that for Dr. Ramsey to begin showing up. He would drive by nearly every day, smiling and waving. Kim told her mom, who said maybe it was on his way home from work, but then the phone calls began. Kim's dad asked about the day Dr. Ramsey followed her home, and if she talked to him. He said she wasn't in trouble, but that she needed to tell him the truth. Kim told him no, and he asked if she was sure or if she could be forgetting something. She said no again, and he frowned, then asked, "Then how does he know your name?" Kim didn't know. It turns out that was not all he knew. He knew her sister's name as well. Neither Kim nor her sister were allowed to answer the phone, and he called several times a day. Then one night, one of Kim's brothers told them that he was telling their parents that he was going to hurt her and later, her sister. Things got complicated after that. Kim's dad called the police, but as this was before there were any stalking laws, there was not a lot they could do. They told the parents to call back if he tried anything. Kim's dad then called a friend of his who happened to be a cop. For the next month, her dad's friend escorted her to and from school. She couldn't go outside alone anymore. Then one afternoon, all the siblings and their mom were in the kitchen, when all of a sudden one of the brothers saw a glimpse of someone in the garage. Dr. Ramsey came bolting out of it and the brother chased after him. They ran all the way to Cherokee Park where he lost him in the trees. Kim's parents called the police again, but nothing came out of it. The only information they had was a description and a name that was almost certainly fake. A couple weeks later, the family woke up to something horrific happen to their German Shepherd. The cops said there was no evidence it was him and ruled it accidental, but none of them believed that. His phone calls became more informative in the meantime. That night, the dad put in some carpenter nails in the bottom of the French doors until he got a new lock ordered. Her parents had to go to a company event for her dad's work, and the older brother was at a skating event, so only the 3 younger ones were home. Suddenly, the top of the French door swung inward, and in the few milliseconds before the nails in the bottom caused them to snap back, Kim could see his silhouette. The sisters crept down to the brother's room to look. Someone was standing at the back door, knocking loudly. "What do you want?" she said. "Is this the Mercy residence? I have a pizza for delivery." She scoffed at him, declaring she was not stupid and she was calling the cops. Before they knew it, he left. A short while later, her brother returned home. Kim told him what happened and he walked around the yard watching for him. By now, the family had pretty much given up calling the cops because it never helped. As the younger brother was in the kitchen, he had this sensation that he was being watched. He stepped closer, then closer again until he was right up to the door. There on the other side of the window was Dr. Ramsey smiling back at him. He turned to yell for his older brother, but when he looked back again, he was gone. They went out again to look for him but didn't see him anywhere. A week later, Kim was at school and the kids were outside on the playground during recess. She was swinging upside down when she saw that familiar blue car cruising by, moving slowly. There he was, smiling and waving. He called her name and Kim ran to the teacher and told her. The school had been told all about him and the teacher took her inside right away and called Kim's mom. That same day, her mom had gotten a call from the school office asking her to verify that Kim's dad was picking her up, as he called to say that he was on his way. He wasn't. Not long after that, Kim woke up one night thirsty. She went down to the kitchen for a drink, and there, sitting alone in the dark, was her dad. On the table was a gun. He was tired of being afraid every time he left for work that something would happen to his kids while he was gone. Kim sat with him for a time, watching, before he sent her back to bed. Then, as suddenly as it began, it was over. He had vanished from their lives. The phone calls, the drive-by and creepy waves, everything. For a long time during and after the Dr. Ramsey incident, she would have a recurring nightmare in which she would wake up to find him standing over her as she slept. It took a long time before Kim felt like a kid again. She still wonders if the wait had ended for her dad when he was waiting in the darkened kitchen that one night. Kim doesn't know, and she's not sure that she wants to. During the weekends, I, along with my sister and friend, usually went to town around 20 minutes away to go out and eat. It was a busy area, so there were many people on the streets asking for money. After a lot of fizzy drinks, we were walking to the nearest restroom, and my friend accidentally kicked over one of the man's pot of money, and it all went under this young guy's car. The man was still in his car, so luckily she could ask him to move so she could collect the money back. She knocked on his window and asked politely for him to move. He simply stared at her for a second and replied, "All right, young lady." with an extremely large grin on his face. At the time, my sister and I could tell something was up and that man was fishy. However, there wasn't much we could do to prove it. He reversed the car ever so slightly. My friend and I went over to pick up this man's money, and he was waiting angrily. My sister, however, refused to help collect the money, and that seemed very out of character for her, and I knew something was up. She proceeded to watch us pick up the money, until she stormed over to the man's car parked elsewhere. The man turned on his car and drove away as fast as he could. My sister began yelling different slurs at him. She tells us that the man was taking photos of us from his car while we were leaning over to collect the money. As there was not much we could do, we just continued to complain about the man and how disgusting it was. After this encounter, we realized we started seeing the same white car around us. But we didn't think too much of it and made jokes that it was the creepy guy and he was coming to get us. About a week later, when all three of us returned to town to go to McDonald's, we saw the same homeless man outside, and he seemed to have changed places. As we walked past him, the man then whispered, "I pray for you, young girl," and tapped my friend's leg. We all stopped, scared and not sure what to do. But my sister had enough and asked him what he meant by that. He refused to respond, so we continued walking. Later the next evening, I received a FaceTime from my friend, and she seemed pretty shaken up, and she swears there's a person's silhouette in her back garden. I told her to show me, and from what I could see, there was. So my sister and I headed straight to her place and told her to lock the doors. We grouped up in her living room and debated on whether to call the police. We decided to stay with her for the night, just in case. As we all woke up in the morning and went outside before heading to school, we saw multiple sticky notes stuck to my friend's fence. It said simple compliments like beautiful and gorgeous, but the ones further down said more creepy things like soft skin. And then we read yellow polka dots. Strangely enough, my friend always had a liking for yellow polka dots. We asked her whether she maybe had a mad ex-boyfriend, but she claimed she hadn't been with someone for 2 years. We were all scared and confused until my sister brought up considering the drastic increase in that white car and that homeless man saying that to us in town. It could be that creepy man who took photos of us that day, and he may have seen her underwear. We took down the sticky notes after taking a photo of it just in case. I didn't see my friend in school for the next 5 days. I tried visiting and she let me in and locked the door. All the blinds were shut, and her family still weren't back from their vacation. My friend explains how this man returned during the night to put sticky notes on her fence once again, spelling polka dots. I told her to call the police, but she refused. The next day, I convinced her to come along with me to talk to the homeless man and maybe we could find some answers. And luckily, he was still there. We asked him over and over to explain what he said last time or tell us if he knows about the man in the white car. But he wouldn't say anything. My sister stood at the other side of the road to keep watch. Suddenly, the man in the white car creeps up behind us, and my sister came running over and grabbed both of his arms and restrained them behind his back as if she was some kind of police officer. She told the man that she's not afraid to report him to the police and told him to get out of sight and never to disturb us again. The man was able to escape from her hold and got into his car quickly and drove away. We went over to the homeless man who seemed not only scared but guilty. We asked whether he knew that was going to happen, and he was surprisingly honest. The man said he was approached a few weeks ago by him, and said if he could help him lure in my friend, he'd pay him $600 in cash. So the homeless man agreed and got the money. He then said the man called himself Adam J. My friend seemed very shocked about that name. We asked what was going on, and she said Adam J was a kid back in school who kept trying to flirt with her after she rejected him, but that man looked nothing like him. My sister then let the homeless man off with a warning, and we all went back home. Truth is, we never heard whether it was that Adam J. He just vanished in that white car and we never saw him again. Wendell was a panhandler near Tessa's college, always singing opera music. Even though it was clear he was begging for money, she always thought it was admirable, so she gave him $1 each time. She would occasionally strike up conversations with Wendell, and he would blurt out that he almost went to college on a baseball scholarship, but his terrible life choices ruined everything. "Oh, sorry to hear that. I play volleyball, not for a scholarship though," she said. "See you around, okay?" Once, Wendell called her over as she was walking with her advisor. She didn't want to be rude, so she gave him a quick hello and introduced them to each other. Immediately after, the advisor pulled Tessa aside, asking how the panhandler knew her name. She explained their little friendship, but he said you shouldn't forge friendships with the homeless population in the city, or even give them money because they tended to have criminal or addictive histories. She did take a mental note of this, but the very next time she talked to Wendell, he was really irritable and distant. "So your boyfriend, you two live together or what?" Tessa had no idea what he was talking about. "The guy I met from yesterday you were walking with." Tessa explained he wasn't her boyfriend, just her academic advisor. All of a sudden, Wendell wasn't irritable anymore. He was as chatty as he'd ever been. It was around then that Wendell started bringing her gifts every day whenever she passed by. Tessa decided to take it, but her roommate did remark that it was weird. "Come on, it's just a flower, it's alright," she said. Her advisor once again brought it up to her, and he was worried she was being manipulated. So she took their advice and decided to distance herself a little. But very shortly after, classes were all online. About 3 weeks into being back home, Tessa was watching a friend's Instagram story when she heard Wendell singing opera music in the background. "Aw, I forgot all about him. Hope he's doing alright," she thought. But then she noticed the background wasn't near campus, but closer to her hometown. A girl from her college messaged Tessa and said, "This is going to sound really weird, but I feel like I should say something. I was downtown and a beggar asked me about you, like specifically you. He knew you were on club volleyball and your major. I didn't tell him anything, but I thought you should know." Tessa was pretty alarmed at first, but once they talked, she learned her friend was wearing a sweatshirt from their college, so he probably asked around as they both lived in the same town, trying to find out how she was doing. Tessa thanked her, but told her not to worry about it. Besides, she wasn't in town much longer anyways. She had decided to go live near campus again. But that's until Tessa saw Wendell back on the same corner just a week after returning to campus. Okay, even she knew at that time that something was wrong. Tessa stopped giving him money, stopped talking to him, and barely left her apartment. She felt bad about potentially hurting his feelings, but figured he'd get the message. After finals, Tessa decided to visit her brother in a different state. His roommate had moved home, leaving an extra bed, so she drove up to his place to get away from it all. About the 9th day in, she was woken up way earlier than usual to the sound of her brother talking at the door, so she got up to see what was going on. Her brother was talking nicely to someone outside, but when he turned around, he looked really upset at Tessa. He turned back and said, "Hold on here." Tessa's brother immediately got in her face, saying, "Mom and Dad are gonna be so mad at you." She had no idea what he was talking about. Was there cops outside? "You're dating a 40-year-old guy? And you invited him to my house while we're supposed to be staying indoors? You two can go to a hotel or something because he isn't coming in here." "Wait, what? I don't know why you're getting so mad at me," Tessa responded. "I don't have a boyfriend. I don't know what you're talking about. Someone's got the wrong house." "No, he didn't just vaguely say he was here for his girlfriend. He used your name. He said you guys had a fight and he was here to work things out." Feeling even more confused, Tessa finally did the obvious thing and looked through the peephole. She almost didn't recognize him at first because he had showered, shaved, and changed into clean clothes, but it was the panhandler. Tessa was so scared she couldn't speak. He followed me here. Her brother still didn't get it. He thought she was actually dating this guy. He went to the door and told him, "Hey, I just checked. She's not here anymore. She must have packed out this morning. You should do the same." Wendell just stared at him and said, "You're lying. I heard her in there. Tell her I'm sorry. I don't know why she's been avoiding me, but I got cleaned up for her and I'll take her anywhere she wants to go. Tell her that. Tell her, and don't lie. I'll know if you lie." Tessa was watching from the corner, and it sounded like he was walking away. But instead, he was going over to the window. And then she saw him staring. His eyes were bugged out of his head, and he looked like he was just disconnected from reality. He started banging on the windows, shouting, "That's my girlfriend. You can't keep her in there. Let her out. Let her out. I'm coming, baby." Tessa was in shock. She was too scared to run or even move. Before her brother could charge out the door, Wendell punched through the window, and his hand was covered with the glass, and there was an eerie moment of silence when nobody moved. "Damn it, call 911, he said, while he leaned against the door which Wendell was now repeatedly running into. Tessa called them on the phone, and within 10 minutes, the police arrived and arrested Wendell without resistance. He kept trying to tell them his girlfriend was trapped in the house and he'd come all this way to save her. Tessa's brother was even momentarily handcuffed and had to explain to them that he hadn't taken his sister hostage. As they carted Wendell away for arrest, he started singing opera music. Tessa learned a lot of important common sense and life lessons from this horrible experience. But most of all, Wendell, let's not meet again. On one Friday afternoon, I got a call from my friend Sarah asking if I wanted to meet her and another friend Lisa at Dunkin Donuts as we hadn't seen one another in a long time. I got there after a 15-minute walk and found them sitting together, so I joined them. As we were chatting, I noticed that my sister Elena was sat at a table in the corner of the room with her friend Jess. I excused myself from the table and went over to my sister. Immediately, Elena whispered to me,
"Don't look now, but the guy in the blue shirt, I think he's been following Jess and I."
She told me that he's passed their table a good 5 times in the past 20 minutes to go to the bathroom, but he walks slower every time he passes them. I told them they were most likely being paranoid and there was nothing to worry about, but for their peace of mind, I offered to leave with them so they wouldn't feel as worried. I walked back to my table and explained the situation to Sarah and Lisa. Both of them laughed it off and assumed my sister was being paranoid as well. Literally about a minute later, I saw the man get up from his seat and walk towards the bathroom. My eyes followed him, and sure enough, he walked extremely slow past Elena and Jess. In fact, it was almost comical how obviously slow he became. Both Elena and Jess looked in my direction, and I nodded to show that I had seen him walk slower. About 5 minutes later, I walked towards the restroom and I passed Elena and Jess and told them I was ready to leave whenever they were. They both agreed that they wanted to go now, so I said we could leave after I finished going to the restroom. Elena had come in her car, so she was going to give me a lift back. I was walking down the corridor back into the main eating room when Elena and Jess rushed towards me. I asked them what's going on, and they explained that another man had joined the strange creeper and that the men were both pointing and staring at them. We walked back to the eating area. I put my money on our table and explained to Lisa and Sarah that I was taking off and I would explain what was going on when I got home. We all got into Elena's car and left. After a 2-minute drive, we reached my house. Just then, I remembered that I had been meaning to return something I had borrowed from my mother, so I asked if Elena could drive me to my parents' house as she was going there anyways. I jumped out the car to get what I needed when my phone began to ring. It was Elena. She explained that a car had driven past and had pulled into a driveway. She said that the driver was the creep from Dunkin Donuts. I looked out my window and sure enough there was a car which didn't belong to the owner of the house parked on their driveway. I got the girls into the house and locked the door. I instructed Elena to take a photo of the car and the license plate and told Jess to call 911 as she would give the operator more information than what I could. Elena took the photos and we sort of gathered around Jess as she was speaking to the operator. She had finished telling the story and I heard the operator assure us that the police would be on their house soon. A few minutes passed and there was a loud knock at the front door followed by a voice shouting, "It's the police!" We all did a sigh of relief as I went to open the door. Jess told the operator that the police were here and she hung up. Definitely something she shouldn't have done. I was in the process of unlocking the door when I thought to look through the spy hole at the top. I peered through and it wasn't a police officer. It was the same guy. I froze in fear and I didn't know what to say. We didn't call the police! Elena and Jess were both confused as to why I said this. You have the wrong address! I informed the girls that it was the creep at the door and not a police officer. Both were rightfully shocked and extremely scared, as was I. We had a call, sir! I was about to tell Jess to call the police again until I heard the sirens. Sir, you have to let me in! I heard the police pull up and some commotion outside. This time an actual police officer knocked on the door and I let him in. The police officers took the man into custody while another police officer took Elena and Jess into the dining room for some brief questioning. The man was found with a kitchen knife and some other weapons in the car. Everyone was relieved and thankful the police arrived on time. Who knows what could have happened if I didn't look through the spy hole first and accidentally let that man in our house. When Lucy turned 13, she moved with her father to Japan from Colombia due to his job. They arrived to Shizuoka Prefecture and rented a small house to live in. Her dad did research work at one of the universities while Lucy attended a school at Shizuoka closest to their home. During the first week, her dad was able to drive Lucy to school and also to pick her up after. Things were going fine. She started to make new friends, her Japanese was improving, and overall had a great time. But then, Lucy's dad started to work more hours, and in order to spend the weekends with her, he decided to change his routine, meaning he wouldn't be able to drive her or pick her up from school anymore. Lucy had no problem being on her own, and she reassured him that everything was going to be okay. The first 2 weeks walking alone was perfectly fine, until the Tuesday of the 3rd week. Lucy was on her usual route to school, and then a man around his 30s approached her with a kind smile on his face. He greeted her in English and started to say things such as, "It's a nice day," "I should have brought my dog," and "I remember I used to take this way to school." Lucy tried to be polite since it was common to have people from the area approaching her and her dad for small talk. And since Japanese people are so kind and polite, she did the same as well. She told this man that she really needed to hurry for school. He looked at her, quite disappointed, but smiled again and said, "Oh sure, you must be a really good student. Always on time, I hope to see you again." The next day, she saw him again. This time, he told her that he actually had seen Lucy and her dad since they arrived and how he noticed that her dad was no longer driving her to school. He then handed her a plastic bag full of candies and cookies. After that, he finally let her go. In the bag, there were also notes that said, "Have a nice day at school. You are smart. You are pretty." The following day, Lucy decided to confront him. Before he offered one of his gifts, she stopped him and told him he made her uncomfortable and to stop being around her. And all of a sudden, he snapped, and the man started yelling at Lucy, saying she's ungrateful, that she was mistaking their friendship. He pretended to be hurt, and Lucy fell for it. "I should have told my father before," Lucy said. "I should have told him everything." Initially, she felt embarrassed and wanted to resolve the problem by herself. One day, her class had a school trip to the Aokigahara forest. The trip was going well. They were walking near the area of the forest and the surroundings, and were divided by groups of 10 with one teacher at the head. It was going to be a long walk, so everyone was told to go to the restroom beforehand. Each of the students were wearing identification, and when they came back, Lucy suddenly realized that she lost hers, and thought to run back to the restroom to check and see if she dropped it just before her teacher would notice and scold her for losing it. After checking the restroom and not finding her ID, she decided to give up and get back to her group. But then, the guy appeared again. He greeted Lucy and then asked, "What are you doing here?" Feeling shocked and freaked out to see him, Lucy told him that she was in a school trip and that she needed to hurry up and get back to find her group. But before she could get away from him, he said, "Don't you need your ID?" Lucy froze. She looked back at him, and he smiled, then said, I found it on the ground. I recognized your pretty face, so I put it in my car. Let's go get it before you get in trouble." At this point, Lucy was terrified. He started to look more sinister, and she couldn't say anything. Seeing she wasn't responding, the man grabbed her arm and began to pull her. Lucy snapped and freed from his grip and started to run away. He followed behind, running fast while calling out, "Lucy-chan! Lucy-chan, what are you doing? Come back here!" She continued running. She didn't realize that she entered the forest and was now without direction. After running for who knows how long, she no longer heard the man's voice. Her whole body felt heavy, and Lucy couldn't catch her breath. She looked around and everything seemed the same. There was silence. She continued walking for a while until she came across a tending camp. Lucy felt relief when she saw a man come out. She proceeded to tell him everything that happened. He seemed confused and a bit scared of her. But after seeing Lucy crying, he changed his expression to a more warming one. He listened to everything quietly until she finished. They both agreed to call the cops and alert the authorities of the place. Thankfully, he knew the way back to the entrance of the forest, and 2 of the forest keepers were walking there. His name is Yuki, and Yuki told them in Japanese everything that Lucy had told him. The forest keepers brought them to an information area where they called the police and told them to wait there. They also sent other forest keepers to look for the classmates and alert them about the guy. Meanwhile, Yuki tried to comfort Lucy, telling her what he was doing in the woods. He said that his younger brother passed away 5 years ago, and since then, he's been going to the forest on his brother's birthday to honor him. When the police arrived, she told the officer everything that happened while another group of police officers searched the area. They finally found the guy in the forest. They arrested him and searched his car for evidence, and found tape, rope, and a knife. She thanked Yuki for saving her life, and shortly after, the trip ended and the school called her father. He immediately rushed to the school, but he didn't scold Lucy that day. He just hugged her, and she cried on his shoulder. Carly was searching for a nice laptop to buy on Craigslist. She was looking, searching around until she came across one in perfect condition for an extremely affordable price. Carly was thrilled. A laptop for this price in perfect condition too? She immediately emailed the guy who was selling it, asking questions about the computer like the hardware specs, etc., just to make sure she wasn't getting scammed. He responded saying that it's hers. She was the first to respond to his offer, so Carly arranged a meeting to collect the laptop from him. Weirdly, he asked for her address, her name, and surname. Carly told him she's not exactly comfortable with giving her name and address to strangers. He seemed to be fine with it though. She was waiting for him at the university when suddenly, someone walks up to her. "Hey, are you Carly?" "Oh yeah, that's me. I have the laptop for you." "Awesome, thanks so much," she said. "Can I take a look at it?" After a brief check that everything on the laptop was working properly, she got the money out and the transaction was smooth. "Hey, I really appreciate it. I hope you have a nice day." "Thanks, you too." She left the university, went back home, and pretty much forgot about him. Everything was fine until this happened. Carly started doing her school project when she suddenly deleted one of her files by mistake. She opened the trash bin to get the file out and saw hundreds of photos of numerous girls. The photos had "My love" or "My darling" letterings near them, all circled with red marker. Carly thought that this guy must have been a dirty cheater, but then she discovered a creepy coincidence. All the girls looked exactly like her. She got scared and decided to take a walk. While she was walking at the park, she saw a tall figure in a black hood. Carly pretended not to see him, but she was tearing apart inside as the figure was getting closer and closer. She started picking up the pace, but the hooded man was right on her tail. Carly ran out of patience, left the park, and quickly hopped on the bus and made sure that this guy wasn't following her. When she was finally home, she called her brother over and told him about the creepy pictures and the scary figure she saw at the park. He calmed Carly down and she showed him the pictures on the laptop. He was absolutely disgusted. "What is wrong with this guy?" he said. Her brother was very familiar with computers and its mechanics, so he decided to check the laptop. He started doing something to it while Carly went to her room to take a nap. About an hour later, she heard a loud yell from outside. She got up, flustered, ran out the room, and found her brother sitting on the floor, looking at the laptop like it was some kind of monster. She noticed something on the floor. It was a tracker placed inside the laptop she bought from the man on Craigslist. Carly froze, and it was all adding up now. The laptop, the low price she bought it for, him asking for her full name and address. This guy placed the tracker in the laptop and he sold it to her so he could stalk her. And she was certain the scary figure she saw there was the same guy. Carly then realized that this whole week she was being stalked, never noticing anything. She and her brother rushed to the police immediately. They started asking her questions, but she realized that this guy's face was completely erased from her memory. She started to look him up on social media, but failed. The mysterious man she bought the laptop from on Craigslist suddenly vanished without a trace, and the police never contacted them again. To this day, Carly still thinks about that tracker placed inside the laptop, what he's been doing when he was following her, and what could have happened if she didn't leave the park immediately.